The letter in Willa Kendrick's trembling hand was wrinkled and stained with what could only be blood. And as she stood at the edge of the dusty ranch watching the sun bleed across the Texas horizon in the spring of 1878, she knew delivering it to Wade Zimmerman would change both their lives forever. She had traveled 3 weeks from St. Louis to reach Fort Worth, then another 2 days riding out to the sprawling cattle ranch that sat like a fortress against the endless prairie. The journey had been brutal, her body aching from days in the saddle, her heart heavy with the weight of a promise made to a dying man. Thomas Garrett had been her employer, her friend, and in his final moments, he had pressed this letter into her hands with eyes that held more desperation than she had ever seen. "Find Wade Zimmerman," Thomas had whispered, blood bubbling at his lips from the knife wound that had stolen his life in a senseless alley fight. "Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I should have written sooner. Give him this, Willa. Promise me." She had promised, and Willa Kendrick kept her promises. Now, standing before the ranch house with its weathered wood and sturdy construction, she wondered what kind of man would inspire such devotion in his final moments. The house was larger than she expected, 2 stories with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Cattle dotted the landscape as far as she could see, and the sound of men working drifted from the nearby barn. This was a working ranch, prosperous and well-maintained despite the harsh Texas climate. Willa adjusted her bonnet and smoothed her travel-worn skirt. At 24, she was past the age most women married, but circumstances had never favored romance in her life. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving her to care for her ailing mother until consumption took her 3 years later. Since then, Willa had worked as a secretary and bookkeeper, most recently for Thomas Garrett's shipping company. She was practical, educated, and had learned to rely on herself rather than dream of a husband who might never come. The front door opened before she could knock, and Willa found herself face to face with a man who seemed carved from the same unforgiving landscape that surrounded them. Wade Zimmerman was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his face was all sharp angles and hard lines. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as a winter storm and just as cold. He was perhaps 30, maybe a year or 2 older, and he looked at her with the kind of wariness that suggested he had learned not to trust easily. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, rough like gravel. "Mr. Zimmerman." "Wade Zimmerman." His eyes narrowed. "Who is asking?" "My name is Willa Kendrick. I have traveled from St. Louis. I have something for you from Thomas Garrett." She watched his face carefully as she spoke the name, saw the way his entire body went rigid, saw something flash in those gray eyes that might have been pain before it was shuttered away. "Thomas." He said the name like a prayer and a curse combined. "Where is he?" Willa swallowed hard. "I am sorry, Mr. Zimmerman. Thomas died 3 weeks ago. Before he passed, he asked me to bring you this." She held out the letter with a hand that trembled despite her efforts to remain steady. Wade stared at the letter as though it might bite him. For a long moment, he did not move, did not speak, and Willa could see the war being fought behind his eyes. Finally, with a hand that was not quite steady, he took the letter from her. His fingers brushed hers, calloused and warm, and she felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. How did he die? The question was barely above a whisper. A knife fight in an alley. "The authorities said it was robbery, but Thomas told me before he died that he had made enemies in his business dealings. He said he knew the risks." Wade's jaw clenched. Fool. Always too quick to trust the wrong people. But there was grief in his voice, deep and raw. He looked down at the letter in his hand, then back at Willa. "You came all this way to deliver a letter. I promised him I would. He said you were his oldest friend, that you had saved his life more than once. He wanted you to know that he was sorry for not writing sooner, for letting pride keep you apart. Something shifted in Wade's expression, a crack in the armor he wore. Come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey. The interior of the house surprised her. While the furniture was simple and functional, everything was clean and well maintained. The main room held a large fireplace, comfortable chairs, and shelves lined with more books than she would have expected. It was the home of a man who valued order and perhaps sought solace in solitude. Wade gestured to a chair. Sit. I will get you water. Willa sank into the chair, only now realizing how tired she truly was. Her legs ached, her back protested, and she wanted nothing more than to close her eyes and sleep for a week. But she had completed her mission, delivered the letter as promised, and now she could figure out how to get back to Fort Worth and then home to St. Louis. Wade returned with a cup of cool water, and she drank gratefully. He stood by the window, the letter still unopened in his hand, staring out at his land with an expression that spoke of memories and regrets. Thomas and I grew up together, he said suddenly, his voice distant. Ran wild through these plains when they were even wilder than they are now. We signed up together when the war came, fought side by side for 4 years. He paused, and Willa could see his throat work as he swallowed. After the war, after I lost my wife to fever, I came back here to my family's ranch. Thomas went east, said he wanted to make his fortune in the cities. We argued about it. I called him a fool for leaving Texas, for chasing dreams instead of building something real. He called me a coward for hiding out here. We have not spoken in 10 years. He regretted that, Willa said softly. In his final moments, your name was on his lips. He wanted you to know that you were right, that he should have listened to you. But more than that, he wanted you to know that he never stopped considering you his brother. Wade's hand tightened on the letter, crumpling it slightly. I should have swallowed my pride and written to him. Should have gone to see him. Now it is too late. It is never too late to honor someone's memory, Willa said. You can read his words, know what he wanted to say. That is something. Wade finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Willa felt the intensity of that gaze like a physical thing. Why did he choose you to bring this? Were you his wife? No. I worked for him as his secretary and bookkeeper. He had no wife, no family. I suppose in the end I was the closest thing he had to a friend in St. Louis. Then you knew him well. Well enough to know that he was a good man who made some poor choices, but who tried to do right by people when he could. He spoke of you often, you know. He would tell me stories about growing up in Texas, about the adventures you had. I think he was homesick but too stubborn to admit it. Wade's laugh was bitter. That sounds like Thomas, always too stubborn for his own good. He turned the letter over in his hands, then carefully broke the seal and unfolded the pages. Excuse me while I read this. Willa nodded and turned her gaze to the window, giving him privacy. She watched the sun continue its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, she could see cattle moving slowly across the land, hear the faint calls of ranch hands as they finished their day's work. There was something peaceful about this place, something that called to a part of her she had not known existed. All her life she had lived in cities, surrounded by buildings and people and noise. Here, the silence was vast and somehow comforting. She heard Wade make a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and she glanced over to see him wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. The letter trembled in his grip, and when he finally looked up, his expression was raw with emotion. He apologized, Wade said, his voice thick. Apologized for being stubborn, for not coming home. He told me about his business, about the mistakes he made. He said he wished he could see the ranch again, see me again. He asked me to forgive him. I am sure he knew you would, Willa said gently. He also wrote about you. Wade's eyes met hers. He said that if you were brave enough to make the journey, if you kept your promise to deliver this letter, then I should help you in whatever way I can. He said you were a good woman who deserved better than the hand life had dealt you. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thomas was too kind. I am simply someone who keeps her word. That is rarer than you might think. Wade folded the letter carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket over his heart. You said you traveled from St. Louis. That is a long journey alone. Where are you staying? I came straight from Fort Worth this morning. I suppose I will ride back there tonight and find lodging at the hotel before arranging passage back to St. Louis. Wade frowned. That is a 2-day ride and it will be dark soon. The prairie is not safe at night, especially for a woman alone. You will stay here tonight. I have a spare room upstairs. In the morning, I will take you back to Fort Worth myself and see that you get on a proper stage. I could not impose on you like that, Mr. Zimmerman. You have just received difficult news. It is not an imposition. Thomas asked me to help you, and I will honor that request. Besides, I have a ranch full of men and not enough proper food to feed them. If you can cook anything better than beans and hardtack, you would actually be doing me a favor. Despite the heaviness of the situation, Willa found herself smiling. I am a decent cook. I suppose I could manage dinner in exchange for a safe place to sleep. Then it is settled. Wade stood, and Willa realized again how tall he was, how much presence he carried. Let me show you to your room so you can freshen up. Dinner is usually at sundown, which gives you about an hour. The room he showed her to was simple but clean, with a bed that looked more comfortable than anything she had slept on in weeks, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch. Someone, probably Wade himself, had made an effort to make it welcoming. There were fresh linens on the bed, a vase with wildflowers on the dresser, and clean towels by the wash basin. My wife decorated this room, Wade said from the doorway, and there was such pain in his voice that Willa turned to look at him. She died 6 years ago during a fever outbreak. We had only been married 2 years. I am so sorry, Willa said, meaning it. She was everything good in this world, and I was not there when she needed me. I was out on a cattle drive 3 weeks away. By the time I got the message and rode back, she had been in the ground for 4 days. He looked around the room with eyes that saw into the past. I have not been in here since we buried her. Have not wanted to, but Thomas was right, damn him. I have been hiding, holding on to grief like it is the only thing that matters. Grief does matter, Willa said softly. It means we loved, and love is never wasted. Wade met her eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding perhaps, a recognition of shared pain. My wife's name was Catherine. She would have liked you, I think. She was always saying this ranch needed more people with education and sense. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Wade cleared his throat. I will leave you to wash up. The kitchen is downstairs to the left. I will warn the men that we have a guest so they mind their manners at dinner. After he left, Willa sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply feel. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically, but she had kept her promise. Thomas could rest in peace knowing his final message had been delivered. Now she just needed to survive dinner with a house full of ranch hands, and tomorrow she could begin the journey home. Except, as she washed her face and hands in the cool water from the basin, she found herself thinking about Wade Zimmerman's gray eyes and the way his voice had broken when he spoke about his friend and his wife. There was something about him that called to her, something beyond the obvious physical attraction. He was a man carrying the weight of loss, just as she was, and there was a kind of kinship in that shared understanding. Willa changed into her one clean dress, a simple gray cotton that was practical rather than pretty, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was larger than she expected, with a good stove, ample counter space, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. She found beans, bacon, flour, and some canned vegetables, along with a few precious eggs in a basket. It was not much, but she could work with it. She was just putting biscuits in the oven when she heard boots on the porch and male voices. The door opened and Wade entered, followed by 4 ranch hands who stopped short at the sight of her. "Men, this is Miss Willa Kendrick. She is a guest and will be treated with respect. Miss Kendrick, these are my hands." Jake and Marcus work the cattle, Pete handles the horses, and Lewis is our best tracker and hunter. The men nodded politely, removing their hats. They were a rough-looking bunch, weathered by sun and wind, but their eyes were curious rather than threatening. "Pleased to meet you all," Willa said. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. I hope you like beans and bacon with biscuits." "Madam, anything that is not cooked by Wade is a blessing," Jake said with a grin. He was young, probably not yet 25, with sandy hair and an easy smile. "Wade cannot cook?" Willa asked, glancing at the rancher. "I can cook well enough to keep from starving," Wade said defensively, "but I will admit my skills lie more in ranching than in the kitchen." The men laughed, and the tension in the room eased. They settled around the large table while Willa finished preparing the meal. She found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of cooking, something that had always soothed her. When she finally set the food on the table, the men dug in with enthusiasm that was gratifying. "Miss Kendrick, this is the best meal we have had in months," Marcus said around a mouthful of biscuit. He was older, probably in his 40s, with gray threading through his dark hair. "It is just simple food," Willa protested, but she was pleased nonetheless. "Simple food cooked well is better than fancy food cooked poorly," Lewis said. His accent carried hints of Spanish and his dark eyes were kind. "You have a gift, señorita." "Miss Kendrick brought news from an old friend of mine," Wade said, his voice quieter now. "Thomas Garrett. He passed away in St. Louis." The men sobered immediately. "I remember you talking about him, boss," Pete said. "I am sorry for your loss. He asked Miss Kendrick to bring me a letter. She traveled all the way from St. Louis to keep her promise to him." The men looked at her with new respect, and Willa felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I simply did what anyone would do." "No, madam," Jake said seriously. "Most people would have sent the letter by post or not bothered at all. You are a brave woman to make that journey alone." The conversation turned to ranch business after that. Talk of cattle prices and water sources and a fence that needed mending. Willa listened, fascinated by this world that was so different from her own. These men lived close to the land, their lives dictated by seasons and weather and the needs of their animals. There was a simplicity to it that appealed to her, even as she recognized the hardship and danger that came with it. After dinner, the men thanked her and headed to the bunkhouse, leaving Willa and Wade alone to clean up. They worked in companionable silence, Willa washing dishes while Wade dried and put them away. "Thank you for dinner," Wade said finally. "And thank you for bringing Thomas's letter. I know the journey was not easy." "It was the right thing to do," Willa replied. "He was a good man who made mistakes, but he tried to make amends at the end. That counts for something." Wade nodded, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "I wasted 10 years being angry and proud. 10 years I could have had my friend back. Now he is gone and I cannot fix it. You cannot change the past, but you can learn from it. That is what Thomas would want." Willa dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. "He told me once that you were the best man he had ever known, that you had integrity and courage that was rare. He admired you, even when you were arguing. He said that many times. He regretted the distance between you, but he never stopped caring about you." Wade's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Willa felt her heart ache for him. She had barely known this man for a few hours, but she could see the goodness in him, the pain he carried, and she wanted to ease it somehow. "I should get some sleep," she said softly. "Tomorrow will be another long day. Of course. If you need anything during the night, my room is down the hall. Do not hesitate to wake me." Willa nodded and headed upstairs, but sleep did not come easily. She lay in the comfortable bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, thinking about Wade Zimmerman and the letter she had delivered. She thought about Thomas, about his final moments, about the regret in his eyes. Life was too short for pride and anger, too brief to waste on grudges. She had learned that lesson when her parents died, but it seemed Thomas and Wade had needed more time to understand it. Morning came too soon, pale light filtering through the curtains. Willa dressed and made her way downstairs to find Wade already awake, coffee brewing on the stove. He looked tired, as though he had not slept well either. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning. Coffee, please." They sat at the table, drinking the strong, bitter coffee in silence. Outside, the ranch was coming to life, the sounds of men and animals beginning their day. "I was thinking," Wade said finally, his voice hesitant. "You came all this way to deliver Thomas's letter, but you never told me what your plans are now. Do you have a job waiting for you in St. Louis? Family?" "No family. As for a job, I will need to find new employment when I return. Thomas's company will be sold or dissolved now that he is gone. So you have nothing waiting for you." Willa felt a flash of defensiveness but pushed it down. "I have my independence and my skills. I will find work." "I am sure you will, but I was wondering if you might consider staying here for a while." Wade held up a hand before she could protest. "Hear me out. This ranch is doing well, but the bookkeeping is a disaster. I have been trying to manage it myself and failing miserably. I could use someone with your skills to organize my accounts, get my records in order. And the men could certainly use someone who can cook properly. I would pay you a fair wage, provide room and board. You would be doing me a genuine favor." Willa stared at him, surprised by the offer. "You want to hire me? You barely know me. Thomas trusted you enough to send you here with his final message. That is recommendation enough for me. Besides, I can see you are competent and hard-working. Those are the qualities I value most." He paused, then added more quietly, "And if I am being honest, it would be nice to have someone here who understands loss, someone who does not look at me with pity or awkwardness." It was that last admission that decided her. Willa understood exactly what he meant, that terrible isolation that came with grief, the way people either treated you like fragile glass or avoided you entirely. Here was someone who saw her as a person, not as an object of pity. "How long would you want me to stay?" "As long as you are willing." "A few months at least, to get things organized. After that, we can see how it goes." Willa thought about returning to St. Louis, about the cramped boarding house and the search for new employment, about the city noise and the memories of Thomas's death. Then she thought about this ranch, with its vast skies and surprising peace, about the interesting work Wade was offering, about the man himself with his storm-gray eyes and broken heart. "I will stay for 3 months," she said. "If at the end of that time you are satisfied with my work and I am happy here, we can discuss a longer arrangement." Wade's face transformed with his smile, and Willa realized he was handsome when he was not carrying the weight of sorrow. "Thank you. You have no idea what a relief this is. I will need to retrieve my belongings from Fort Worth. I left my trunk at the hotel there. We can go today. I need to pick up supplies anyway." The ride to Fort Worth was pleasant, the morning air cool and fresh. Wade proved to be an interesting companion, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the land. He showed her where Comanche had once camped, where a famous gunfight had taken place years ago, where the best fishing could be found in the creek that wound through his property. "How large is your ranch?" Willa asked, marveling at the seemingly endless expanse of land. "About 8,000 acres. My father homesteaded here in the 40s, built the place up from nothing. He died during the war, leaving it to me. It has been my responsibility ever since." That is a tremendous responsibility for one person. It is, but it is also freedom. This land is mine and no one can take it from me. I work hard and the land provides. There is satisfaction in that. Fort Worth was bustling when they arrived, a growing town that served as a stopping point for cattle drives heading north. The streets were crowded with cowboys, merchants, and families. Wade helped Willa retrieve her trunk from the hotel, then loaded it into the wagon along with supplies he purchased at the general store. "Is there anything you need?" he asked as they prepared to leave. "Any personal items or supplies?" Willa thought about her meager funds and shook her head. "I have everything I need." Wade studied her for a moment, then said, "If you are going to work for me, you will need proper clothing for the ranch. That city dress will not last a week out here." Before she could protest, he was steering her toward a shop that sold women's clothing. The proprietor, a plump woman with kind eyes, took one look at Willa and immediately began pulling out practical dresses, split skirts for riding, and a sturdy pair of boots. "Mr. Zimmerman, you should have told me you were getting married," the woman said with a smile. "I would have prepared something special. Miss Kendrick is going to be working at my ranch as a bookkeeper and manager," Wade said firmly. "She needs clothing that will be practical for ranch work." The woman's eyes widened with interest, but to her credit, she did not pry. Instead, she helped Willa select several outfits that would be suitable for her new life. When Willa saw the total cost, she started to protest, but Wade was already counting out bills. "Consider it part of your wages," he said. "You cannot do the work I hired you for if you do not have proper clothing." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, Willa too overwhelmed by the sudden changes in her life to make conversation. Just yesterday morning she had been preparing to deliver a letter and then return to St. Louis. Now she was employed at a Texas ranch, with new clothes and the promise of 3 months in a place that felt more like a home than anywhere she had lived in years. "Are you having second thoughts?" Wade asked as they neared the ranch. "No," Willa said, surprising herself with how certain she sounded. "I am just adjusting to how quickly things have changed. I understand, but I think this will be good for both of us. You need a place to land and I need help. Sometimes the best arrangements are the ones that benefit everyone." The men were pleased to learn Willa would be staying. That night at dinner, they were more relaxed, joking and talking freely. Willa learned that Jake was saving money to start his own small ranch someday, that Marcus had been a soldier in the war and found peace working with cattle, that Pete had a gift with horses that bordered on magical, and that Lewis had been born in Texas when it was still part of Mexico and knew the land better than anyone. Over the following weeks, Willa settled into a rhythm at the ranch. Her mornings were spent in Wade's office, sorting through years of disorganized records, creating proper ledgers, and organizing his business affairs. She discovered that the ranch was actually more profitable than Wade had realized, but that money had been tied up or misallocated due to poor record keeping. "You are losing money on the cattle sales in Fort Worth," she told him one afternoon, spreading out her calculations on his desk. "The broker there is charging you too much. If you took your cattle north to the railhead in Dodge City, you would make at least 30% more profit." Wade studied her figures, his expression impressed. "How did you figure this out?" I compared your sale records with market reports I found in your old newspapers. The math is clear. You are being taken advantage of because the broker knows you do not track the numbers carefully. Dodge City is a hard drive, several weeks on the trail. But you are right, the profit would be worth it. He looked up at her with something like admiration. Thomas was right about you. You are remarkable. Willa felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. Over the past 3 weeks, she had come to respect Wade deeply. He was fair with his men, hard-working, and despite his grief, he had moments of dry humor that made her laugh. She found herself looking forward to their morning coffee talks, to the discussions about the ranch that stretched into the evening, to the rare smiles that transformed his austere face. She realized with some alarm, developing feelings for him that went beyond respect or friendship. It was a warm afternoon in June when everything changed. Willa was in the garden behind the house, trying to coax vegetables from the stubborn Texas soil when she heard shouting from the main yard. She hurried around the building to find Wade and his men gathered around a stranger on horseback. The man was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, barely staying upright in his saddle. "Raiders," he gasped. "Hit the Morrison ranch this morning. Killed John Morrison and his oldest son, burned the house. They are heading this way." Wade's face went hard as stone. "How many?" "At least a dozen. Maybe more. They are well armed and looking for anything they can take. Pete, ride to the neighboring ranches and warn them. Lewis, Jake, Marcus, get every gun we have and all the ammunition. We need to prepare to defend this place." The men scattered, moving with the efficiency of men who had trained for this possibility. Wade turned to Willa, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself but for her. "You need to hide," he said urgently. "There is a root cellar under the house. If they break through our defenses, you stay hidden no matter what you hear. Promise me." "I can help. I know how to shoot." "Willa, please, I cannot lose anyone else." The raw emotion in his voice stopped her protest. "Please." She nodded, even though everything in her rebelled against hiding while others fought. Wade squeezed her hand briefly, then ran toward the house to get weapons. The next hours were tense beyond anything Willa had experienced. She stayed in the house as instructed, watching through windows as Wade and his men prepared defenses. The wounded stranger, whose name was Caleb, told them the raiders were a mixed group of outlaws and renegades who had been terrorizing small ranches for the past month, moving east across Texas. When the raiders finally appeared on the horizon, Willa counted at least 15 men. They rode with the confidence of people who expected easy prey, who had not yet encountered serious resistance. They were wrong. Wade positioned his men strategically, using the ranch buildings for cover. When the raiders came within range, he shouted a warning to leave or face the consequences. The raiders responded with gunfire, and suddenly the peaceful ranch became a battlefield. Willa watched from the window, her heart in her throat as bullets flew. She saw Wade moving between positions, directing his men, firing with calm precision. Jake took a bullet in the leg but kept fighting. Marcus dropped one raider from his horse. Lewis fired from the barn loft with deadly accuracy. The fight lasted perhaps 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. When it was over, 5 raiders lay dead, 3 were wounded and fleeing, and the rest had scattered. Wade's men had held the ranch with only Jake's leg wound and some minor injuries. Willa ran outside as soon as the shooting stopped, heading straight for Jake. "Let me see," she said, kneeling beside him. The bullet had gone through his thigh, missing the bone and major arteries by what looked like sheer luck. "We need to clean and bind this." She worked with steady hands, using the skills her mother had taught her. Wade watched her with an expression she could not quite read, something between surprise and respect. "You are full of unexpected talents," he said quietly. "My mother was a nurse during the war. She taught me how to tend wounds." Willa finished binding Jake's leg. "He will be fine, but he needs to stay off it for a few days." The wounded raider, Caleb, had lost consciousness from blood loss. Willa tended to him as well, removing the bullet from his shoulder and stitching the wound. When he woke, he looked at her with confusion. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you warned us," Willa said simply. "You could have ridden past, but you stopped to give us a chance to prepare. That counts for something." Over the next few days, Caleb recovered enough to tell his story. He had been a ranch hand at Morrison's place, had tried to fight but been overwhelmed. The raiders had shot him and left him for dead, but he had managed to get to his horse and ride for help. "I owe you my life," he told Wade. "If there is anything I can do to repay you, I will." "You can start by telling the sheriff in Fort Worth everything you know about these raiders," Wade said. "Help him track them down so they cannot hurt anyone else." Caleb agreed, and when he was well enough to ride, Pete accompanied him to town to make his report. That night, after the men had gone to the bunkhouse and the ranch was quiet again, Wade found Willa on the porch, staring up at the stars. "You should have hidden like I told you," he said, but there was no real anger in his voice. "I could not just hide while people were hurt and needed help." "You could have been killed, so could you?" Willa turned to face him, and in the moonlight his eyes were silver instead of gray. "I understand that you have lost people, Wade. I have too, but we cannot live our lives afraid of every risk. I know that." He moved closer, and Willa could feel the heat of him in the cool night air. "But when I saw you kneeling beside Jake, tending to his wound with bullets still flying, my heart nearly stopped. I realized that somewhere in the past few weeks you have become important to me. More important than I intended." Willa's breath caught. "Wade, I know it has not been long. I know we are both still carrying our own grief and pain, but I cannot deny what I feel anymore, Willa. You walked into my life with a letter from my dead friend, and somehow you have brought light back into this house, into me." "I feel it too," Willa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not expect to. I came here to fulfill a promise, and I stayed because the work was interesting and the place was peaceful. But it is more than that now. You are more than that." Wade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, his hand cupped her cheek with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his calloused palm and rancher's strength. "I do not know if I am ready for this," he said honestly. "I loved my wife deeply, and losing her nearly destroyed me. I swore I would never open myself up to that kind of pain again." "I cannot promise that nothing bad will happen," Willa said, leaning into his touch. "Life does not work that way, but I can promise that I will not run from what we might have out of fear. Thomas taught me that in his death. He had so many regrets about wasted time, about words unsaid and chances untaken. I do not want to live my life that way. Neither do I, not anymore." Wade's thumb stroked her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" Willa nodded, her heart racing, and then his lips were on hers, soft and tentative at first, then deepening with a passion that made her knees weak. She had been kissed before, awkward stolen kisses from boys when she was younger, but nothing had ever felt like this. This was fire and comfort combined, desire and safety intertwined. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Wade rested his forehead against hers, his hands now on her waist, holding her close. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as an employee. Stay as someone who belongs here. Someone who belongs with me." "I will stay," Willa promised, "for as long as you want me. Forever might not be long enough." They stood together under the stars, holding each other, and Willa felt something shift inside her. This was not the life she had planned, not the future she had imagined, but it felt right in a way nothing ever had before. The summer passed in a haze of happiness Willa had never experienced. She continued managing the ranch books, and under her guidance, Wade implemented changes that increased profitability. They hired 2 more ranch hands and invested in better breeding stock. The garden she had started flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables for the table. But more than the work, it was the growing relationship between her and Wade that transformed both their lives. They were careful at first, mindful of the men and of propriety, but their feelings were obvious to anyone who looked. Jake joked that the boss was smiling more than he had in years. Marcus commented that it was good to see life back in Wade's eyes. Lewis simply nodded knowingly, as though he had seen this coming from the beginning. In August, Wade took Willa to Fort Worth for supplies, and they visited a photographer's studio. The photograph they took together, standing side by side in their Sunday best, showed 2 people who had found each other against the odds. Wade kept a copy of it on his desk, and Willa tucked one into her journal. "I want to do this properly," Wade said one evening in September as they sat together on the porch, his arm around her shoulders. "I want to court you the right way, not rush things just because we are living in the same house." "I appreciate that," Willa said, though part of her wanted to tell him that she already knew her heart, that she did not need months of courting to be certain. But she understood his caution, respected his desire to honor what they were building, so they courted. Wade brought her wildflowers from the prairie. They rode together in the evenings, exploring the vast expanse of his land. He taught her to rope cattle, and she taught him to dance in the parlor, humming the tunes she remembered from her youth. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing their pasts, their dreams, their fears. In October, Wade received a letter from an attorney in St. Louis. Thomas had left a will, and in it, he had bequeathed a sum of money to Wade along with a letter. The attorney had tracked Wade down through business records and was arranging to send everything. When the package arrived 2 weeks later, Wade opened it with trembling hands. The money was substantial, enough to significantly expand the ranch if he chose. But it was the second letter that affected him most. "Thomas knew he was dying," Wade said as he read, tears streaming down his face. "He wrote this months ago when he first got sick. He knew he did not have long, and he wanted to make sure I knew how much our friendship meant to him. He also wrote about you, Willa. He said he hoped you would find happiness, that you deserved more than the hard life you had lived." "He was a good friend to both of us," Willa said, holding Wade as he wept for the brother of his heart. "He also gave me permission to love again. He said Catherine would not want me to live alone, that she would want me to find joy again." Wade pulled back to look at Willa. "He said if I was lucky, you might be the one to bring that joy back into my life." Thomas was very perceptive. He was. Wade wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. "Willa Kendrick, I have been trying to be patient, to court you properly and give us both time. But life has taught me that time is precious and should not be wasted. I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment you handed me that letter with your hand shaking but your eyes steady. Will you marry me?" Willa felt her own tears start, happy tears this time. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Wade pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "This was my mother's ring. My father gave it to her when they were homesteading this land. She died when I was young, but my father always said this ring represented their partnership, their commitment to building something together. I want that with you, Willa, a partnership, a life built together." The ring fit perfectly, and as Wade slid it onto her finger, Willa felt the last pieces of her guarded heart open fully. She had come to Texas to deliver a letter from a dying man, and in doing so, she had found a home, a purpose, and a love she had never dared to dream possible. They were married in November in Fort Worth. with Wade's ranch hands as witnesses and a small gathering of neighboring ranchers who had become friends. Willa wore a simple white dress purchased from the same shop where Wade had bought her ranch clothes, and she carried a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season. The circuit preacher who performed the ceremony was an elderly man who had known Wade's parents. "I remember when your father brought your mother to this land," he told Wade. "She was a city girl too, not sure if she could adapt to ranch life. But she learned and she thrived, and they built something remarkable together. I see that same determination in your bride. You have chosen well." At the small reception held in the hotel dining room, Jake made a toast. "To the boss and his bride. May they have many years of happiness, and may the boss remember how to smile now that he has someone to smile for." To Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman, Marcus added, "May their home be filled with love and laughter." Lewis simply raised his glass and said, "Salad y Amor, health and love," and everyone drank to that. They spent their wedding night in Fort Worth, in the best room at the hotel, and Willa discovered that physical love could be tender and passionate, a joining that was both vulnerable and empowering. Wade was gentle with her, patient, and when they finally came together completely, Willa felt as though they had created something sacred. "I love you," Wade whispered in the darkness, holding her close. "I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Willa replied. "Thank you for giving me a home, for giving me a family. You gave me those things too. You brought me back to life when I thought I was just marking time until I died." They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and if the men noticed any difference beyond Willa now sharing Wade's room, they were too polite to mention it. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that included not just work and responsibility, but joy and intimacy and the building of a shared future. Winter came to Texas, brief but cold, and Willa learned to appreciate the warmth of the fireplace and the comfort of her husband's arms at night. They made plans for the spring, for expanding the garden, for the cattle drive to Dodge City that would take place in late summer, for improvements to the ranch house. "I want to add on a room," Wade said one night as they lay in bed, Willa's head on his chest. "A nursery." Willa felt her heart skip. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I hope, God willing, we might have children someday, that this house might be filled with the sound of little ones running through it. Catherine and I tried, but it never happened. I thought maybe it was not meant to be for me, but with you I want to try. I want to build a family." "I want that too," Willa said, emotion thick in her voice. "I want to fill this house with life and love and laughter. I want to give our children the happy childhood neither of us had." "Then we will," Wade said simply, kissing the top of her head. "We will build something beautiful together." Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle calves were healthy and numerous, promising a good season. Willa's garden flourished beyond expectations, providing not just food but beauty. And in April, Willa realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be certain before telling Wade. When she finally did on a warm May evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then set her down gently as though she might break. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Willa, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his joy was obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, overjoyed, grateful, all of those things. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and the Texas summer heat made her exhausted and uncomfortable. But Wade was attentive and patient, bringing her cool water, rubbing her aching back, reading to her in the evenings when she was too tired to do anything but rest. The men treated her like delicate porcelain, which alternately amused and frustrated her. She continued doing her bookkeeping work as long as she could, but eventually, Wade insisted she rest more. "The ranch will survive without perfectly organized ledgers for a few months," he said firmly. "You and our baby are more important." In December, on a cold winter night, Willa went into labor. The nearest doctor was in Fort Worth, too far away to reach in time, so Lewis rode to fetch a midwife from a neighboring ranch while Wade stayed with Willa, holding her hand and trying not to show his terror. The midwife, a capable woman named Sarah who had delivered half the babies in the county, arrived just as Willa's contractions became unbearable. "First babies take their time," she said calmly. "Settle in, this will be a long night." She was right. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, hours of pain and fear and exhaustion. Wade stayed by Willa's side the entire time, murmuring encouragement, wiping her face with cool cloths, holding her hand so tightly she thought his bones might break. Finally, as the sun rose on a clear December morning, their son was born. He came into the world with a strong cry, healthy and perfect, and when Sarah placed him in Willa's arms, she felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is beautiful," Wade whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas Wade Zimmerman, honoring the friend whose death had brought them together and the father who would raise him with love. Little Thomas was a good baby, healthy and curious. He had Wade's gray eyes and Willa's dark hair, and both parents were completely besotted with him. The ranch hands became honorary uncles, each taking turns holding the baby and marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. "The boss is completely gone over that boy," Jake said one day, watching Wade walk around the yard with Thomas in his arms, pointing out horses and cattle as though the infant could understand. "Never thought I would see Wade Zimmerman soft, but fatherhood has done it." "Love has done it," Willa corrected gently. "He always had that softness in him. He just needed a reason to show it again." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. The cattle drive to Dodge City that summer had been successful, proving Willa's calculations correct. They made enough profit to expand their herd and improve their facilities. Wade built the addition to the house, not just the nursery but also a larger kitchen and a proper office for Willa's bookkeeping work. When Thomas was 2, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring they welcomed a daughter they named Catherine Rose, after Wade's first wife and the wild roses that grew along the creek. "I hope you do not mind," Wade said softly as they looked down at their newborn daughter. "I wanted to honor Catherine's memory, but if you are uncomfortable with it—" "I am not uncomfortable at all," Willa assured him. "Catherine was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. Our daughter should carry her name with pride." Catherine Rose was a quiet baby where Thomas had been loud, contemplative where her brother was energetic. She had Willa's dark eyes and Wade's serious expression, and Wade loved her with the same fierce devotion he showed his son. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. Willa's management skills kept them profitable even in difficult years, and Wade's reputation as a fair but firm rancher attracted the best hands. Jake eventually saved enough to buy a small piece of land adjacent to the Zimmerman ranch, and Wade helped him get started with breeding stock. Marcus became the ranch foreman, managing the day-to-day operations with calm efficiency. Pete's skill with horses led to a side business breeding and training mounts for other ranchers. Lewis taught both Thomas and Catherine to track and hunt, passing on his knowledge of the land. When Thomas was 5 and Catherine 3, Willa gave birth to twin boys, James and Joseph. The house that had once echoed with silence was now filled with the chaos and joy of children. Wade proved to be a devoted father, patient with his son's energy and protective of his daughters. Yes, daughters. When the twins were 2, Willa was surprised to find herself pregnant again at 38. She gave birth to another daughter whom they named Margaret, called Maggie from the start. She was a sunny child, always laughing, and she wrapped her father around her little finger from the moment she was born. 5 children, Wade said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their brood play in the yard under the watchful eyes of the ranch hands. When you first arrived with that letter, if someone had told me that in 10 years I would have 5 children and be happier than I ever imagined possible, I would have thought they were insane. Life is strange that way, Willa agreed, leaning against his shoulder. The best things often come from the most unexpected places. Thomas would be so pleased to know how things turned out, that his death, as tragic as it was, led to all of this. Wade gestured to their children, to the prosperous ranch, to the life they had built. I like to think he is somewhere watching, knowing that he gave us this even if he did not mean to. I think he knew exactly what he was doing when he sent me to you, Willa said. In that letter he gave me to deliver, he told you to help me. But I think he was really telling you to open your heart again, to let someone in. Smart man, our Thomas. The smartest, Willa agreed. As the children grew, they each developed their own personalities and interests. Thomas, the eldest, had his father's serious nature and love of the land. He followed Wade everywhere, learning the cattle business from the ground up. Catherine Rose shared her mother's love of books and learning, though she also had a surprising talent for handling horses that rivaled Pete's. The twins, James and Joseph, were inseparable troublemakers who kept everyone on their toes with their pranks and energy. And little Maggie, with her sunny disposition, was the heart of the family, able to make even the grumpiest ranch hand smile. The years were not without challenges. There were droughts that tested their water supply and their ingenuity. A fire one summer destroyed part of the barn, though no one was hurt. Cattle prices fluctuated, making some years more profitable than others. Catherine Rose fell seriously ill with influenza when she was 7, and Willa and Wade spent 3 terror-filled days nursing her through the fever. But they faced every challenge together, as partners, and their love only deepened with time. Wade often said that Willa was the true boss of the ranch, that her intelligence and management skills were what kept them successful. Willa always replied that Wade's integrity and hard work were the foundation of everything they had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Willa with a trip to Fort Worth, leaving the children in the capable hands of Marcus and the ranch hands. They stayed in the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Wade gave her a necklace with 5 small stones, one for each of their children. 10 years ago, I was a broken man living in the shell of a house, just going through the motions of life, Wade said as he fastened the necklace around her neck. You came into my life with nothing but a letter and a promise, and you gave me everything. You gave me love and hope and a reason to wake up every morning. You gave me our children and a real home, not just a house. I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. You gave me those same things, Willa replied, touching the necklace with gentle fingers. I was alone in the world, just surviving from day to day. You gave me a place to belong, a family to love, a purpose beyond just getting by. You saw me as more than I saw myself, and you helped me become the person I was meant to be. They danced that night in their hotel room, just the two of them, Wade humming the same tunes Willa had taught him in the parlor all those years ago. And later, in the darkness, they showed each other with touch and whispered words how deep their love had grown. When Thomas, their eldest, turned 18, Wade made him a partner in the ranch. "This land will be yours someday," he told his son. "Yours and your siblings. But you need to learn not just how to work it, but how to manage it, how to make the difficult decisions that will keep it thriving. Your mother and I are building this for you, for all of you." Thomas took the responsibility seriously, working alongside his father with dedication and growing skill. Catherine Rose, at 16, had become an accomplished rider and was training horses with Pete, while also helping her mother with the ranch accounts. The twins, at 13, were still more interested in mischief than work, but even they were learning the skills they would need. And Maggie, at 11, was showing signs of her mother's head for numbers and her father's love of the land. On a warm spring evening in 1893, 15 years after Willa had first arrived at the ranch, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. The children were telling stories and laughing, the sound of their joy filling the air. Wade reached over and took Willa's hand, squeezing it gently. "Happy?" he asked, though he could surely see the answer in her eyes. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Willa replied. "Sometimes I think about that day I arrived here, dusty and tired and not sure what I would find. I was just trying to keep a promise to a dying man. I had no idea I was riding toward my future." "Thomas knew," Wade said softly. "Somehow he knew. That letter you brought me was not just his goodbye. It was his final gift to both of us." "Then we have honored it well," Willa said, looking at their children, at the thriving ranch, at the life they had built from grief and hope. "We have built something beautiful in his memory." "We have," Wade agreed, "and we are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us, more memories to make, more joy to find." He was right. They had many more years together, watching their children grow and start families of their own. Thomas eventually married a neighboring rancher's daughter and took over more of the ranch operations. Catherine Rose married a schoolteacher and opened a school on the ranch for local children. The twins, as expected, left for a few years to seek adventure, but eventually returned home to settle down. And Maggie, their baby, surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, one of the first women in Texas to do so. Wade and Willa became grandparents many times over, and their house remained the heart of an ever-expanding family. On holidays and special occasions, children and grandchildren would fill every room, and the sound of laughter and love echoed through halls that had once known only silence and grief. As they grew older, Wade and Willa often sat together on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in colors that never stopped being beautiful. They had lived a good life, a full life, and they had done it together. "I would do it all again," Willa said one evening when they were both in their 60s, their hair gray and their bodies showing the wear of hard work and long years. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would make that journey from St. Louis again in a heartbeat. And I would open that door to find you standing there with that letter, and I would thank God for sending you to me," Wade replied. "You saved me, Willa, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Willa corrected. "That is what love does. It saves us from our grief, from our loneliness, from the dark places we sometimes find ourselves. It brings us home." And it was true. Against all odds, through tragedy and hope, Willa Kendrick had found her home in the heart of Texas with a man who had thought himself beyond healing. Together, they had built something that would last for generations, a legacy not just of land and cattle, but of love and family and the courage to open wounded hearts to the possibility of joy. The letter that had brought them together was still kept in Wade's desk, preserved carefully alongside the photograph from their courtship and other mementos of their life together. Sometimes their grandchildren would ask about it, and Willa would tell them the story of how she had traveled across the country to deliver a message from a dying man, and how that journey had led to the greatest love of her life. "Your grandfather said no to love for a long time," she would say, her old eyes still bright with memory. "But sometimes the heart knows better than the head. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to try again, even when you think you cannot. That is what your grandfather did for me and what I did for him. We chose each other, and that choice made all the difference." And when Wade and Willa finally passed, many years later, within months of each other, as couples who have shared a deep love often do, they left behind a ranch that was more than just land and buildings. They left a family that knew the value of love and loyalty, of hard work and integrity, of choosing hope over despair. They left a legacy that had begun with a letter and a promise, and had grown into something beautiful beyond measure. Their graves were placed on a hill overlooking the ranch, side by side under the vast Texas sky they had both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line that summed up their story: "Two hearts healed, one love forever." And in the spring, wild roses grew around their resting place, blooming year after year as a testament to love that endures beyond death, beyond time, beyond anything that might try to diminish it. The widowed rancher had said no to love until she arrived with his best friend's last letter. And in saying yes, in taking that leap of faith, both had found something more precious than gold, more enduring than stone. They had found home in each other's hearts, and that home had expanded to include children and grandchildren and a legacy of love that would echo through generations. It was a story of second chances and keeping promises, of grief transformed into joy, of two broken people who had the courage to heal together. And it was a story that would be told around dinner tables and on front porches for as long as the Zimmerman Ranch stood as a testament to what love, real love, could build.